City planners and traffic engineers have been trying valiantly to make more space available for traffic handling. But the increasing number of cars requires wider streets and more off-street parking lots. In many cases, valuable land must be sacrificed to the traffic monster. But these changes only bring more cars into already overcrowded downtown streets, and the traffic situation becomes more acute and aggravating than it ever was before.
Charlotte is no stranger to the problem of traffic congestion. Booming population growth, a 700% increase since 1950, combined with post-World War II suburban sprawl, has presented a difficult challenge to the city. The largest problem has been inefficiency in traffic infrastructure.
Most cars carry only 1 or 2 people. Within this block, 50 people in 40 cars. No wonder we have traffic congestion. Now, here's a practical approach: public transit. Let's see how it helps solve our problem. A motor bus can carry as many people as all the cars that can be jammed into a city block. One trolley coach provides enough transportation per trip to eliminate the need for as many as 50 parking spaces in a downtown area. A modern streetcar, with its large carrying capacity, handles enough traffic each day to remove hundreds of cars from heavily congested downtown areas.
This video from 1948 argues for public transportation as a solution to congestion. Charlotte once had a vibrant public transportation system, but 65 years later, the city still faces an uphill battle against increased expenditures on buses, light rail, and streetcars. How did we get to this point? In 1887, Charlotte was a small city of approximately 10,000 people. But little did residents know that a revolution was coming in the form of public transportation. That year, horse-drawn cars were introduced to provide service along Trade and Tryon streets. Residents enthusiastically embraced the vehicles, proclaiming they would rather do without water or gas than dispense with the streetcars. 4 years later, electric streetcars replaced the horse-drawn vehicles as part of the new Dilworth suburban development to the south of downtown. Within a decade, streetcar service became a hallmark of the growing progressive city. However, a new form of transportation was about to enter the picture.
The invention of the automobile provided us with another means of transportation.
The Wadsworth brothers, owners of a livery stable, brought the first automobile to Charlotte in late 1899. Although slow to catch on due to its high price point, by 1915 cars were becoming more affordable for the middle class. The automobile competed with street railways, not only as personal transportation, but also in the form of the jitney bus, a forerunner of motor buses. As more and more cars drove upon the streets of Charlotte, traffic congestion became an issue. Rather than provide support to the streetcar company, city leaders responded by building more roads. For many residents who could not afford automobiles, the streetcar was a necessity in moving about the city. This dependence was tested in 1918, when the Chatham Estates Street Railway went bankrupt. For 2 years, this area of Charlotte had no streetcar service. Although jitney buses attempted to fill the transportation gap, patrons preferred either streetcars or private automobiles for their transportation needs. As resident Jake Newell noted, people would stand along the streets and hope a generous automobile driver would offer a ride to the square. Nationally, streetcar patronage peaked in 1923 at 15.7 billion riders. Automobile ownership numbers rose concurrently, with over 14,000 registered vehicles in Mecklenburg County by the end of 1924. By this point, urban transportation planning practices began catering to automobiles. While automobile ownership eroded public transportation patronage, streetcars encountered more competition in the form of the motor bus. Duke Power Company, owner of the transit system, introduced buses to the city in 1934 as a feeder line at the end of streetcar routes in Dilworth and Elizabeth. The rising financial cost of maintaining the streetcar system, combined with the waning popularity of public transportation in general, meant that the days of the streetcar in Charlotte were numbered. Four years later, Duke replaced all streetcars in Charlotte with motor buses. On March 14, 1938, the ceremonial final running of the streetcar in Charlotte took place. Civic leaders took part in the celebration of progress, for buses were now considered the public transportation vehicle of the future. However, Duke faced an uphill battle, convincing Charlotteans to rent the buses. While these vehicles were capable of providing more coverage of the city, public transportation patronage had dropped over the past decade to under 10 million streetcar and bus passengers in 1938. But just a few years later, public transportation received a boost in the form of World War II rationing. With gasoline and rubber among the limited materials, increasing numbers of automobile owners were forced to abandon their cars for public transportation. By 1944, patronage had increased to over 20 million. Even after the war ended, automobile shortages kept many people dependent upon the buses. However, the post-war period proved disastrous for public transportation, not only in Charlotte but also around the country, as government prioritized the funding of automobile infrastructure.
We've been trying to move traffic when the basic intent is to move people. We must move people or our cities will be strangled. To move people, cities must take drastic action. Establish a system of arterial and local streets.
In 1946, Charlotte formed its planning department to shape the predicted post-war growth facing the city. While public transportation played a part in the movement of people throughout the city, planners identified automobiles as the primary form of transit for Charlotteans. This focus carried forward in the design and construction of a new crosstown right-of-way, Independence Boulevard. Civic leaders also waned in their promotion of public transportation. For instance, the 1947 City Directory spoke glowingly about the bus system, but 3 years later the passage had disappeared. 1949 saw the peak of bus patronage in Charlotte at 26.8 million passengers. The coming decade proved tumultuous for public transportation in the city. Unable to sustain mounting financial losses, Duke sold the bus system to city coach lines in 1954. Bus driver strikes in 1951 and 1958 eroded patronage. The latter strike in particular, which lasted nearly a month, convinced many Charlotteans that they did not need to utilize undependable public transportation if their own automobile was available.
The ever-expanding involvement of people takes on a new dimension. The great new dimension of interrelated use. The new individual transportation means new freedom of movement to all of us, the dispelling of distance, and for country dwellers as for city dwellers, a new and far and wide range of life.
By the end of the 1950s, the automobile culture ruled Charlotte. City coach lines attempted to draw more patrons by revising their routes to include peak hour service to the rapidly growing suburban areas. But this action proved to be a futile effort. Even neighborhood and residential design placed emphasis upon the automobile, with homes spaced along wide curving streets and the garage door prominently out front. People were secondary, at least those using their own 2 feet. So how did public transportation in Charlotte change from a universally embraced mode of travel to a forgotten one? Simply put, the automobile. It was not merely the vehicle's presence that eroded streetcar and bus patronage. Over time, municipal planning prioritized automobile over public transportation, despite the fact that buses and streetcars were more efficient modes of moving people throughout the city than automobiles were. Additionally, As the automobile became more affordable for a larger portion of the population, the lure of personal independence through transportation was overwhelming.
If you're sick of fighting traffic now, what do you think it might be? What do you want? Your town strangled by traffic congestion? Continual destruction of valuable property? Or is your town going places, building a sound urban transit system that will speed the travel of people today or city grow tomorrow? Stop thinking in terms of moving vehicles, people, and your town will be going places.